Charlie, hello.
Hi, Louise. How are you?
Good. David Lindsay, hello.
Hello, how are you, Lisa?
Yeah, well,
Good.
Dad said he was speaking with you earlier and he didn't think you were going to join in, so thanks for
No,
coming.
he kept telling me not to, and I realised that he must have some reason or other to deny me the pleasure of seeing you and all those nice people you're going to get. So I thought I'd head him off at the pass. Yeah.
No, it's very good.
That should be fine. Good evening, everybody.
Dad, you made it. Hello.
Yeah. G'day, Charles, yes. And David,
guy.
nice, thanks very much for calling in.
And we've got Mark's
And
Mark's iPad. Who's on Mark's iPad? He's connecting to audio.
Mark's iPad. That's Mark. The Mark I know, Lise.
Not sure. Hopefully it's a Mark you know.
The Mark you know as well.
I'm not sure who Mark is. Mark, hello.
He's a question mark.
Brady. G'day, James.
He's just connecting to audio. He's sitting in the dark. James, hello.
He's muted.
Yeah, he's muted. He's worked it out. How you going, James?
Are good now?
Yep.
We have to have the lights out at home because there's too many bugs.
Oh, right.
Oh,
The bogan moths are causing trouble, are they?
I wish there were. These are Rutherglen bugs.
Oh,
Oh, okay. Oh, dear.
just give it another couple of minutes in case any others join.
So we've got 2 West Australians here at the moment. The rest of you all eastern staters. How is that amazing season going over there?
it's going well, but we would be looking for rain soon
Oh my God.
in the southern part of the eastern states.
Now, Charlie, you're near the Grampians, aren't you?
That's right. Yes, I'm in Western Victoria.
Yeah,
South.
that's right. I know you're. Yeah, I'm just trying to work out exactly where you were in Western Victoria. Of course, I can always reach for this because this is my guide.
Oh,
This is my guide to you and Lizzie.
there you go. That was a week when they had no news and they were short of something to write about.
Yeah. And David's just been to the dentist. How are those gums, David?
Oh, they're all right now. I had a very nice white from the Serpentine Valley, which was fixed it all up. It's all right.
And then I phoned you and said, I need you for support.
No, you said you said don't join in. That's all right. And I thought there's something Machiavellian about this, so I'm going to join in just to see what the hell he is.
Well, you're a fine gentleman. There's no doubt about you. David, we had a little chat when I phoned him up and said, would he put his glass of wine down and join in? Because I was worried there may be no one appearing. And David was telling me about the appetite after lambing. What was that again, Dave? It was about 300%, is it?
No, well, actually, in the conversation, we said that I said, look, I didn't think I'd bother joining the thing because the concept of actually cutting back on feed to sheep at any time was something that I never advised anybody in 45 years of trying to advise people because of mainly merino people, and they always enjoyed any sort of advice that says don't give them enough feed, and they couldn't overfatten bloody merino. So it was a you know, it wasn't all that important. But, you know, with you blokes in the eastern states who've got this fantastic season, God, you're a lucky bunch of people. You know, talking about rain, we haven't had rain for, no, geese had some rain, but mostly we haven't had rain for the last 5 months. So, you know, you've had such a fantastic season that maybe this is a bit of a problem for you. But there are a couple of little nuances in there that we ought to talk about a bit later on, perhaps.
Yeah, I think it's been probably at least 12 months we've sort of been talking about, or I've been hearing over here, producers just talking about, you know, the ewes are bloody fat in really good condition. And I remember last, you know, winter leading up to lambing, and ewes just in, yeah, not really healthy condition, very, you know, fat rather than fit type scenario. And it hasn't really, nothing's really changed in terms of they probably haven't really lost much of that condition the whole way through, even having lambs at weaning time, you know, still being pretty fat. So especially if people are understocked. I know Charlie, you know, mentioned stocking rate, something that he thinks is really key to managing this issue with these really productive sheep, stocking rate. And you know, obviously coming off the back of a couple of hard years, people were really had trimmed their numbers back a bit, and then suddenly, you know, unable to put them under that stocking pressure. I think we'll just make a start. I was expecting Seamus to join us, but anyhow, he can catch up on this online. I have prepared a little bit of an outline, I suppose, to guide our discussion tonight. What I'm really hoping is for us to develop a bit of a resource. Obviously, we've got a few people on the call who've already given me a bit of feedback, and I've got some extra feedback from other people to sort of build into the conversation, but really hoping to develop a bit of a resource that we can share with our producer network for those who can't join in the discussion tonight, because I think, yeah, it could be pretty helpful for some people, particularly those who've only recently made the transition into specialist maternal sheep. I think, you know, as David was alluding to, merinos are a very different animal to what our maternals, Mount Ronan maternals are, and they physiologically behave quite differently. And a lot of the guidelines around managing ewes, even such information such as lifetime ewe management, you know, they're all guidelines that all that science and research predominantly has been done on a merino genotype, and is not necessarily the most economical and productive guidelines to be using for maternal sheep. And we do find ourselves with these situations where, you know, these maternals do have a huge appetite. If they've got food in front of them, they'll hoover it up, which is, I suppose, a response to the selection pressure that, you know, Dad's been putting them under over these, you know, his breeding program for these maternals. So I just thought, given that there's only a few of us actually on the call, I might leave it on the screen where we can see each other's faces. It's probably easier to interact, but I'll just be referring to my notes to sort of guide the conversation a little bit. I wanted to start off with a bit of a, I suppose, a background to the Mount Ronan maternal, what the purpose is and what, you know, what environment they've been selected under. And therefore, why does that make that sheep type potentially more susceptible than other sheep types to, you know, blowing out in condition in these really good years? I wanted to get a little bit of feedback from you on the call about what sort of complications potentially you can experience with over-conditioned ewes. I've got a few generic ones that I think would suit most of the maternal producers out there, but yeah, if you are experiencing any particular ones, or have in the past, that would be really good just to share what those are. And then leading on to what some of the strategies that you're trialling, I suppose, to mitigate or manage the risks of having really heavy ewes. How do you stop that from happening? Or if you do find yourself in that situation where they are really, you know, too fat, how are you able to change that to alleviate those risks? And then finishing off with what we think as a collective are some of the really good recommendations that we would put forward to other producers in this network to try and refine their management of their ewes to really make sure they're productive and fit in these really good seasons, as well as in those tougher seasons that they've been sort of genetically engineered to do really well in. So just starting with a bit of an intro about, I suppose Dad can sort of jump in here a little bit about, I suppose, the environment that your ewes have been selected under, and probably acknowledging that, in a decade, in any given decade of years, we probably get 7 pretty ordinary or rubbish ones, across Australia. That we probably only get 2 or 3 really good ones in a decade, and we're sort of having them now in the eastern states. So long term, for a profitable sheep type, Dad's focus has really been to be breeding those sheep that are really resilient, really productive under those, tougher conditions. I'm pretty sure every year we get it, Mount Ronan's a pretty tough one, which gives us a lot of opportunity for selection. If you don't put stud seed stock sheep under commercial pressure and under those really tough conditions, you can't select the animals that really perform in those tough environments. So it's been a real backbone of Dad's breeding program compared to other maternal seed stock businesses out there, that we do put them under really, tough conditions and let the really good ones rise to the top. Dad, I'll let you just sort of take over from there, I suppose, and put in your 2 cents to that part of the conversation.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't think it's any secret. I mean, I've held the view that for over half a century now that it was all based around outstanding female performance, and I've just been female focused in the breeding program, and we've all got them. We've all got those outstanding females in any flock, and so it's the maximum utilisation of those outstanding females and spreading their genes around, in my opinion, which really can take your flock to another level. So it's not really a ram orientated program, it's a female orientated program, and you just breed rams from those outstanding females. So any new genetics, that proven new genetics that comes through into the flock comes through those outstanding females, and it's just always been a no-brainer, I suppose, to me, from even when I was just a boy, was observing those outstanding females, and as I said, we've all got them. And as a result, like lots of things, it accumulates, I believe, and you just tend to get, on average, hardier sheep. And luckily, not luckily, because I look out the window now and it's just gravel stones and stuff here. We've had two false breaks, and the clover's died twice, and we don't normally get a break until, lucky to get it in June these days, and it's dead by mid-July, mid-October. So it is a great groundwork for breeding fairly tough sheep, and they've always done extremely well, and that's been satisfying because it is proof of the fact you can target any traits and develop them through a breeding program. But
I was just going to say, Dad, a little bit about, I suppose, the Mount Ronan maternal model is really to produce maximum kilos of lamb in sort of 100 days.
Yeah, well, Louise, that's really down to you, because I'm pretty unscientific. Well, I've really just been an observer of livestock and then recorded and all the rest of it. You're the one who's sort of taken it to another level with your individual efficiency work, and I think that's really a powerful thing, because we've been able to substantiate the actual, although it's not an ASBV, because our management groups it's all our sheep are, they're not separate, they're in different management groups, so some sheep have got a better chance of optimising kilos per body per mating weight in 100 days, better than others because they might have had more feed. But over the years, I suppose you can say there is a balancing up effect, because it's a cumulative percentage.
What I wanted to say is, like, our sheep, what we're trying to breed are animals that will produce a lot of kilos of lamb over about 100 days of lactation on the peak pasture availability. So we're not after stacks of lamb. We haven't put fertility genes in there to get, stacks of lambs. We want, moderate amount a good amount of lambs, and we don't want heaps of triplets and things, good amount of lambs that will, you know, drop onto, you know, really good winter pastures, and wean a lot of kilos of lamb, you know, at the end of the growing season. So in WA, we have a pretty narrow growing season. I remember as a kid, we'd be lambing in June, and sort of getting away with it, and Dad's pushed lambing back further and further, and now sort of mid-July is probably when the earliest lambs are born, just because there's not enough pasture available now until that time point to be able to have the ewes lambing without supplementation, and being able to obviously record and tag at birth and assess their mothering ability and things we can't be supplementing. So we've really got, you know, they're dropping at, you know, earliest ones at mid-July, and the season's virtually cut out mid-October, hasn't it, Dad? So,
and we don't grow much tucker either, just quietly.
yeah,
The
so they've
sheep
really
do
got this
extraordinarily well.
3-month period to get those lambs on the ground, grow those lambs out, and have those lambs weaned. So how do you get good ewe efficiency? There's a couple of pieces to the ewe efficiency equation. Obviously, you want a lot of kilos of lamb, and we know that if a ew's got multiples, weaning multiples, she's going to have more kilos of lamb. There's obviously, you know, a couple of factors that come into place there. You've got lamb growth rates, which are really important, but you've also got lamb age. So if we get a ewe that drops her lambs right at the start, you know, conceives in the first cycle, her lambs will be 17 days older and 17 days heavier at weaning. So they'll just rise to the top. Obviously, the ewe size is part of that efficiency equation as well. So we want the more moderate ewes. We don't want ewes that are lighter because they're in poor condition. We want ewes that are lighter, in good condition at a lighter or a smaller size. So that's part of our efficiency equation, is correcting for condition score. So we're not just dividing by the ewes joining weight regardless of condition. We're actually bringing it back to a condition score of 3, so they're all on a level playing field, to make sure we're not actually incidentally selecting for ewes that are poor doers and might be lighter because they're in real poor condition. So that's something that we do a little bit differently to other people, to really try and make sure we've got a productive ewe that's rearing lambs whilst maintaining her condition, and coming off that lambing and weaning without too much of a deficit in body condition to have to, you know, feed her up to get her back into a good joining condition. So is that a pretty good summary, Dad, of sort of what we're aiming for? Is a really, you know, resilient ewe, productive ewe?
It is. This sounds a bit like a Mount Ronan. Sounds a bit like a Mount Ronan cell to me, but
well, it's just about, you know, the management to go along with this package. We've got to make sure we're keeping in mind what we're trying to do. And we do have some people, you know, a lot of people in industry still lambing very, very, very early in the season, which I think is inappropriate for our genetics, because they're still chasing those really heavy lambs that they'll sell very early on in the season, sucker lambs. So that's not really the model. That's not the model that we're breeding we're not breeding our sheep to fit that model. You know, we're breeding our sheep to suit a later lambing model, where you're really matching your animal demand with pasture availability, and weaning good lambs off, you know, sucker lambs off at the end of the pasture growing season, and having a ewe that's able to bounce back and hopefully not require too much supplementary feeding through the rest of the cycle. Yeah, we did mention, obviously, compared to a merino, these composite sheep do have a large appetite. If they've got food put in front of them, they will eat it. And that is partly bred into them because we've been selecting for resilience. So we want ewes that will, during the good times, store that excess energy as body condition, so that when the tough times hit, and you can either keep the feed cart in the shed for a little bit longer, because they'll live off that condition stored on their back. So it is just built into them. So it is it can be a bit of a challenge, I suppose, if it just goes too far and they're on good feed for too long. So I suppose, yeah, the next thing I wanted to get was a bit of feedback from the group on what are some of the complications that you have experienced over the years. And you're probably, you know, well experienced with maternal sheep anyway, so you've probably had a few complications in the past, and now you've learnt some strategies to mitigate them. But I suppose what I've been hearing, not necessarily the Mount Ronan producer network, but just in the broader industry, was last year a heap of people having issues with feet and lameness due to excessive body condition. I heard a heap of people talking on Twitter and other platforms about cast ewes and just, you know, stuck on their back because they don't have that spine anymore. They're just all flesh. I just wondered if anyone's experienced that. Any metabolic issues potentially, if you've got ewes that are over-conditioned leading up to lambing and they just can't actually obviously fit in their requirements for their getting through their for energy and through the diet. Are fatter ewes potentially more at risk to metabolic issues? I'm not 100% sure of that that answer, but I suspect they might well be, because if they suddenly start mobilizing a heap of fat, you get, I think it's called ketosis and all these issues that can kind of happen. Lamb survival is another thing that obviously if you've got lameness or if you've got cast ewes or metabolic issues, that all does link back to lamb survival and ewe survival as well. So I suppose I just want to get, a little bit of around the table. If everyone can just have, you know, a few seconds to say what you've experienced in the past, not necessarily this year, because you might just be really tip-top managers, but in the past with, or what your neighbours or what you've heard issues potentially arising.
Elise, mastitis is another thing too, which is potential, I suppose.
Is mastitis linked to?
No, just I recall someone saying they reckon they had a bit more mastitis trouble, but
Right.
you know, that was someone over in the States. But
Right.
anyway, look, I'll just be quiet and
You're right.
ask everyone else.
Just going, maybe Charlie, if you want to start, have you got any feedback on any of those sort of issues that people can get or you've had?
Look, I think it's interesting what you've said. For people running composites, if they've got too fat, you haven't got enough in the paddock. And yes, they will eat the paddock into the deck and our feed, but we lamb at a similar time to you do, and I'm all commercial. And we are, the critical date for us is scanning. And once we've scanned, the singles virtually go onto the tennis court and the twins will push them out at between 6 and 7 ewes per hectare. And we've got most of our paddocks now down to 10 hectares. So we're going against the cropping trend, but we've got small paddocks. And when we start lambing, we would not have 1,000 kilograms of dry matter in the paddock. And the good book coming from MLA and from all the others says for twins, you've got to have 1,500 kilograms of dry matter in front of them. I actually think that's causing a lot of problems. And Guy, you said earlier you don't have a lot of feed, but last time I was in WA, when I saw not a lot of feed, it was at least 50% subclaver. And you'll find that the composite type sheep actually does really well, even on 1,000 kilograms of virtually all green, but it's subclaver or, you know, highly nutritious. And by lambing in July, especially for us, our pasture growth rates are through the bottom between 10th of June and the 20th of July. And so we start lambing on about the 15th of July. Peak lactation is almost coincidentally the same time as our pastures start to grow. And I'm guessing you're similar. And so we will work A80 and we've got them stacked on. You can see their feet.
So Charlie, how do you, like in a really good year, how do you get that balance right where you've got enough sheep, I suppose, to keep the pastures down?
Yes, we have. And we lease a property where the pastures are terrible. We've gone out and put clover in it. They're big paddocks. They're 20, 30 hectares. But we've got silvergrass, barley grass, the low fertility weeds. We really, really spend time putting them on according to what they're either twins or singles on the crap feed or the good feed. But our ewes now, we scan in 4 weeks. So the rams have only been out for a short period of time, like nearly 3 weeks. And by lambing at that period of time, we go through winter well stocked, and we just stack them on, and that way we maintain their body weight. But I've got neighbours, and we hardly get any cast. We certainly don't get stokia. And I think that we probably run it hard, but I don't tell people what we do. I keep it quiet. But you certainly, you know, if you've got 3 centimetres of feed, you're lucky. And but the twins go on to feed that's going to be terrific once they hit peak lactation. And I think where I've seen trouble is they've got probably crap feed or not enough stock in the paddock. That would, to me, would be the issue that I think most suffer from.
So to be able to have that flexibility in your system with the number of stock to cope for the natural fluctuations we get, like you have a really good year and then you have a not so good year the next year and you probably have the same number of stock. Is yours all about just managing them and keeping them on tight feed all the way through to that point of lambing, and then after, you know, they got to the point of lambing, you just let them have whatever they've got for the spring? Just open the gates? Yep. Is that sort of your...
That's it.
Yeah,
that's exactly what we do. So
stopping them from getting too fat through pregnancy, and then just let them go for it once they've got the lambs at foot.
Predominantly, that's what we do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So very much through scan, singles go one way, twins go the other, and the dries leave the place. But I think that's critical, and obviously with the numbers, and we've got no crop, so it's all to base for livestock or for the no crop.
So Charlie, can I just ask a question there? It's fascinating, actually. So after birth, after the ewes have had a lamb, I mean, basically there's an overlap period of time where they're still on fairly short tucker, you know, for at least a cycle. They're still on pretty short tucker, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the same system we run here. I mean, it's amazing, short tucker. And I understand what you're saying about clover. I mean, some years we've had less than good clover for sure. A lot of those weeds you just mentioned, actually, but certainly there's no doubt about it. You know, clover, a good mix with good clove through the mix is bloody valuable. But yeah, exactly, not much height of feed at all. And they seem to do very well. So that's very interesting.
I thought I might bring James into the conversation, if that's right, James, to add, so I suppose your experience and the producers around you.
What about, Lise, can I ask whether to ask the boys to say where they're from, so that, you know.
Yeah, yep, James.
More for David's sake and whoever else is.
Yeah, James was on the call last time, so he's a new face for Charlie and David. James, I'll let you just introduce where you're from first. Thank you.
We're at Urungilly, which is halfway between Gundagai and Junee, about 45 minutes east of Wagga, southern New South Wales. We're sort of in a 550, 600 mil rainfall zone, supposedly. Probably more like 500 has probably been the past 10-year average, roughly. So, hot summers, 35 to 42 degrees, you know, winter dominant rainfall. Although we just have had some summer rainfall this year and we just cannot keep enough stock at the moment. So they're all fat, which is a bit of a nuisance heading into winter. But I suppose we joined before Christmas. We've just scanned 2 weeks ago into triplets, twins, singles, and earlies and lates. So we joined for 3 weeks, week out, another 3 weeks. And that gives us a definitive break in the lambing. So they can lamb for 3 weeks, and that way we anticipate we can keep the weight more consistent on those earlies and lates. So if it's a good season, the lates can still be locked up. If it's a bad season, lates are still locked up anyway to give preference to the early feeders. And we try and aim for about 10 ewes a hectare. But we do a bit different. We lamb majority of our ewes on grazing wheat, barley, or grazing canola, contrary to industry belief that it causes problems. As long as you give them plenty of basically lime, salt, magnesium, we don't have any dramas at all, unless there's a rainfall or a rain event coming or change in the weather, and they haven't had their lick for a few days. That's when we'll see problems. So we've been doing that for probably over 12 or 15 years now, and the only time we have problems lambing on grazing cereals, wheat especially, is if they don't have their lick, which we make up ourselves, is just lime, salt, and magnesium. So we used to lamb late June, early July, leave the lambs on mum, and the ewe lambs would always average 55 kilos at joining, I suppose, and we've sort of changed that a bit now to early weaning at sort of 25, 30 kilos, and then they run a little bit harder over summertime. So then the average joining weights now is probably 42 to 45 kilos, I suppose. Joining them a little bit later than industry belief, I suppose, at sort of 8 to 9 months. And trying to get a few more twins, which hopefully puts a bit more pressure on their future body weight or growth.
James, how long have you been doing your split joining, where you've got the sort of one cycle gap, another cycle? Is that a new thing you've been doing, or?
Yeah, this is the 3rd year now for that system. Yeah.
And my other question was, obviously you made the comment that you just have got so much pasture and your ewes are all fat. How are you managing that, from scanning onwards through late pregnancy to keep the weight off them? Are you running them just all sort of in containment on a few sacrificial paddocks, or how are you sort of handling that with, heaps of pasture available?
Yeah, so I suppose, except for this year, it's a bit of an unusual year, but 90% of years we will lock our sheep up, generally at joining time. Ewes go in with 0.8 to 1.2% of rams, containment feeding. All they get is just straw and a bit of barley, and they're locked in containment basically all the way through joining until scanning, and then at the end of scanning, we'll split them up into triplets, twins, singles, earlies and lates. The lates basically just go back onto straw, and then the earlies obviously get a bit better feed, and then the lates get a different ration as well. And just trying to allow those ewes to lose weight over that March, April period, and then hopefully get them onto grazing crop and or pasture, 4 weeks before they start lambing.
Yeah.
Because we find as soon as they get onto green feed, they just put condition on so quickly. It's just, within a month they'll put on a condition score, maybe 1.5 condition score. So we have to be sort of wary that if they're fat, in the containment feeding, they're just going to balloon into 4 up to 5s, and then that's when we have issues. So,
what sort of issues have you been having yourself or other people in your area when they are fat in the past?
We've had them all. Obviously, through trial and error, we've got lessened that a lot. Basically, with the sheep walking through the long, cereals, the hoof drags on the plants, and they end up with wet feet and sore feet. But the composites are very, very hardy, we find, after selection pressure and things. So you always just carry a bottle of Valamycin, but anything that's hoppy just gets cold to the bee mob straight away. So, but there was big losses, up to 15%, 20% of ewe losses in some certain parts last year with sheep being too fat.
From what? Just them breaking down?
Oh yeah, just fat, then foot abscess, and then obviously then that leads into other issues, metabolic issues as well too.
Not eating properly because they're limping around the paddock and lying down too much.
Yep.
That sort of issue. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, certainly. Like I was hearing a lot of stuff around the Riverina 12 months ago, and through lambing. Yeah, a lot of issues of people with a range of sheep types, but just couldn't cope. It's too much. Yeah, wet feed and fat sheep and not fit sheep.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people are just weaning their lambs far too late, so then their lambs are 40, 45 kilos at weaning, or probably even heavier, and then those just lambs turn into monsters. So their ewe lambs are 60 kilos at joining or more, and they just keep growing. And in our environment, with such warm winters and grazing crops and loosen all summer, the worm burden is generally minimal because everyone's in that dual purpose cropping as well too. So our worm burden is quite low, and these composites can just grow, and they just keep growing. So part of the split lambing is to wean those lambs at an early age, and then try and restrict their growth a little bit so they don't end up as monsters, and then try and get them into. We also use regulant in our ewe lambs as well to try and get a few more twins as well too, and also join up earlier just to try and restrict their growth later on. So
thanks for that, James. That's a good well-rounded view of what's happening at your place. Mark's iPad, I'm not sure if you want to introduce yourself or add anything to the conversation. I'll just give you an opportunity if you would like to. The iPad might not have the capability. Jump in at any time if you'd like to say anything. David, Lindsay, anything you'd like to add from your property in Western Australia?
No, I just envy you fellas over Easter in the way in which you're struggling to keep the weight down. But one of the things that you've got to remember is that when we see you walk down the street in any town in Australia and you see a whole lot of fat people and you say they're fat and they're fat for life. Sheep aren't quite the same thing. I mean, sheep do go. Sheep rearing twins well are doing the Mount Ronan trick of coming up to 100%, 100 kilos in 100 days. What do you do anyway? There's no way in which a sheep rearing twins like that is ever going to put on weight. They're going to lose weight, and that's how they're designed. Really, they put on weight in the periods when you've got good feed and all that sort of thing, and then they lose weight at other times, and they're designed to do that. So the concept of having a fat sheep being a real problem or even a permanent problem just doesn't exist. It's not the same as having a fat human, where they've got to go through all sorts of gymnastics, literally, to get the weight down. In fact, the fact that they go up and down is a natural cycle anyway. Now, what we're talking about here is when they go too far because you've got so much feed and not enough sheep to get it down. But you've got to be careful with this thing, because there is the problem of if you don't give enough, if a sheep doesn't get enough feed before lambing, they end up with, you mentioned it, Elise, they end up with preg tox or ketosis and so on. But and you certainly don't want that. On the other hand, there's absolutely no question that if you don't give enough feed and you lamb down in a period when they aren't getting enough feed, that's when you get problems with not getting their lactation underway quick enough. So they have colostrum that's thick, which the lambs can't get much of, and they don't have as much of it anyway. And one way or another, you've got a real problem. And one of the things that you may have heard of Georgette Banchero, the Uruguayan person who was here for several years. She did some fantastic research on that that area, and she found that, and I got to say now it's merinos that she was working with, but in fact, feeding for only 3 or 4 days just before they lamb actually doubled the amount of colostrum that was available for lambs, which didn't matter too much for singles, but it mattered enormously for twins because they didn't have enough between them. They didn't get enough feed that way. But she could double the amount of colostrum in that last little while. So if you, what I'm trying to say is you've got to be careful with this manipulating the feed regime to use, because if you take it the wrong way, you can actually spoil things rather than make things work for you. But certainly that's worked out that we weren't allowed, in fact, to do when she was here and doing that sort of experimentation. We weren't allowed to do it because of do the ultimate experiment, which was to look at the lamb losses if you didn't give them this extra little bit of feed just before lambing. The difference between that and if you did, because of animal welfare committees and so on, wouldn't let it happen. So it wasn't until she got home to Uruguay that she did it, and found that she actually improved the survival of lambs just with that little bit of feed at lambing, just before lambing. So you've got to be a bit careful. And the other thing you've got to be careful about is when you see a fat animal, is it they were fat because they didn't have a lamb, or was it the other way around?
They didn't have a lamb because they were fat.
Yeah, and you know, your fat animals, you want to look at them sideways because they may well be fat because they haven't had any maternal responsibilities for 1 or 2 years. You know, if you haven't been following them properly, and so you say, oh, they're fat, therefore they didn't have lambs. But in fact, they didn't have lambs, therefore they're fat. And they're the sort of things you got to sort of make sure you get sorted out. But I'm only putting a bit of mud in the water here.
No, I appreciate
Of course, you're much more, of course, David, you're a much more enlightened fellow now because you're running Mount Ronan maternals. And you haven't got any fat ewes. They're fat because they haven't had lambs, because you've got rid of all of them, haven't you?
Yeah, you did. You're absolutely dead right. Yes, yes, it's changed my whole outlook on life, actually.
And I don't think Charlie's got any fat ewes that are fat because they haven't had any lambs, have you, Charlie?
No, I don't. There are 3 things I want to take out of what David said, and I completely concur. We feed our twin-bearing ewes barley for the last 3 weeks before they lamb. Not a high rate.
As a booster.
But,
As the boost, you mean, for colostrum?
Yes, we do. And I swear by it, but I stop as soon as the first or second lamb appears. The other thing that I think we need to do, and it follows on from that work that was done years ago in WA about increasing colostrum. We picked that up. Because we haven't got enough feed and their stomach's so full of lambs, being twins, they need some high quality supplement. And so we feed them at around about 150 to 200 grams a day of barley leading in. The other thing I really think the industry needs to do is work out how to describe pasture. Most people that get into trouble have got way too much dead feed in their pasture and they don't bear their paddocks off. And that's bad for 2 reasons. You've got low quality pasture, but you've also got worms. And the other thing we do is our agent each year drafts off all the big ewes, and we keep them for 1 more year and they go into a terminal flock, not a maternal. So we draft the elephants off each year. And why are they elephants? They may have lost a lamb because we're too busy marking to actually get the dries out, and there's so few, and there's only 2 or 3 or 4%, we don't worry about it. But we do draft them out of our maternal flock and they go into the terminals. There's 3 things there that I think that and I picked it up when I went round with Mike Hyder and Mr. Grimm from WA, names you might remember, and they showed me pastures with stock on less than 1,000 kilograms, and I realised then a maternal doesn't need what the good book says.
Mm.
Charlie, can you repeat those names? I didn't hear them. Who were the? Who did you go around with?
Mike
Do you
Grimm.
remember Mike Hyder and
Right.
Grimmy? David, Mr. Grimm,
No.
was it Mike? It wasn't Mike Grimm, was it?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know either of them. But then I'm not a very knowledgeable fellow.
Oh, that was when you.
No, they were with the department.
David will know them.
Yeah, I do. They were at Albany. They were with.
They did the stocking rate trials.
Yeah, they did some very good work down there for a while until.
With Kevin Bell?
No, it wasn't with Kevin Bell. It was with Peter Doyle. Was the fellow who eventually went to Victoria.
That's right.
And they used him very badly because they put him in the bloody dairy industry in the end, and you know he was out of his comfort zone. I think he was a fantastic bloke, Peter Doyle, in the sheep industry, and he had Grimmy, who was a entomologist, not anything else, and Mike Hyder is a violinist.
That's right.
They really did some lovely stuff in just
those you Eastern Staters. David's actually one of yours. He's an Eastern Stater as well, and he came from a dairy farm, so he's really telling funny stories at the moment.
Yeah, you said you wouldn't do anything like this to me.
David, tell the story just very quickly, because it's really important. Tell the story about why you stayed in Western Australia, how you came over here and you went down to field days in Esperance and all that sort of stuff. Because it's just interesting, because we do need more of that, don't we? People who are really locked into these new ideas and things. Can you just quickly tell us about that? I remember you telling me years ago.
I came here in 67, and you know, if you can think back, some of you can't think back that far because you're not that old enough. But when I came in 67, you know, I left New South Wales where everybody knew everything, and you know, I was at the University of Sydney, and nobody listened to anybody at the University of Sydney. I mean, they knew enough from the country, and I got here to Western Australia, and everybody wanted to know what the hell, you know, what they wanted to know things. You know, it was wonderful, and there was a thing called the what did they call it? The first year I was here, the producer scientist forum or something, and they couldn't find a place in Perth big enough to hold all the producers, because some 800 or 900 producers turned up to hear what all the people in any branch of science that had anything to do with sheep at all were doing. And I thought, that's just fantastic. I mean, I'm in an era where somebody might even want me. In the end, they didn't, but it took them about 30 or 40 years to find out. So anyway, one way or another, it was a different environment totally. And that's why I stayed here.
Yeah, well, Charlie and James might you didn't educate those guys earlier on, did you? So they're very inquiring.
They're only young blokes. They weren't born when I left there.
If only.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Can we ask James?
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I want to ask James. I agree completely with what James said. What percentage do you get in your first scanning with your 17-day mating, James?
This year we're probably averaging 75% at the with Regulin, using 1% rams. In the mob, where we're only using 0.7% rams, we're probably back to 65%. And the so it's probably between high 60s to high 70s, generally speaking, in the first cycle. but it doesn't really bother me too much because we join for 3 weeks, week off, 3 weeks, and then another week off, and we join again. So all those so-called dries or empties at the first scanning are actually joined the same time as our ewe lambs. So if we end up with 5 to 6% dries, they end up being scanned again at the same time with our ewe lambs. So it just means that we end up with about a 1% total of our main ewe flock that's dry every year. It just means that she will lamb in that 3rd or 4th cycle.
James, can I ask what does Regulin do in terms of the number of twins you get compared with if you didn't use Regulin? I mean, these Mount Ronan things, in my experience, are pretty damn prolific. Why do you need Regulin?
I'm not entirely sold on the fact that we're getting lot more twins. It's just the fact that because we're joining on the 20th of December, these things just aren't ready to cycle. So we need to try and trick them into cycling earlier to try and hit the ground running. And why do we lamb so early? Well, we put grazing crops in anywhere between last week of February right through March until first week of April, and our historical date of mid-June, we got 2,500 to 4,000 kilos of green feed across every paddock on the whole farm. So if we lamb earlier, we can use that feed more efficiently.
Oh, it's to get them to lamb, to get them to cycle earlier rather than the twins.
Yeah.
Now that makes sense because they do have an anestrus period during the November, December, January. There's no question.
Yeah.
And then in response to sort of Charlie's little mention there that he's drafting off all the big fat ones, we've actually been weaning all our ewes and lambs through our Clipex sheep handler the past 3 years. And I bought a 5-way. I added on an extra 2 drafting gates, so it's now a 5-way draft. So I can set the weights for any ewe that's above 85 or 89 kilos, and she just goes into the cull mob straight away. And I can set the weights, anything below a certain number. She's a skinny ewe, she goes into a different mob, or I can check udders or mastitis, and they can go into the cull mob as well at the same time. And then I draft off the ewe lambs and wether lambs at the same time, and then they can just go to their paddock, which has saved us a fair bit of time and also efficiency of getting these ewes and basically culling or sort of classing up our sheep the same time as we're weaning. Takes a little bit longer, but I think results were slowly getting there, I think. So.
And are you selling those big fat ewes, James?
We're still increasing numbers after the farm we bought a couple of years ago. So we will from now on probably. Like they're anywhere from 90, 95 up to 115 or 20 kilos, some of the real big monsters. So it's pretty hard to try and get a 100% efficiency weaning at 120 kilos, isn't it?
Yeah, bloody hard. It's impossible.
Elise, can I just make a comment there? The interesting thing about James is that he's a real trial man, and you've got quite a few different types of sheep on your farm, haven't you, James? And you're continually assessing and trialing to work out and getting good information about relative performance and that sort of stuff. So, you're very valuable to us because you're substantiating stuff in your own mind as to whether there's any advantages, not only with your systems, but with your genetics as well. So, which is interesting.
Yeah, we've got a couple of producers doing that sort of stuff, which is good.
And then in our part of the world where, we can grow, 3/4 of our total yearly biomass in sort of 6 or 8 weeks in springtime, which Mark Lucas and Mike Goot, have reported many times over many years. I don't see an issue really with a sheep being big and fat, eating excess pasture that we physically just cannot eat at that time of year anyway. So everyone's banging on about sheep being too big or too fat or inefficient or efficient. Well, if she's going to eat the high quality feed in springtime and store that fat on her back, I think that's probably highly efficient.
Mm.
Mm.
As long as she's being productive, I think.
Yes. As long as she's hopefully rearing twins or triplets for us. But I don't see a drama in our system where we've got excess high quality feed in winter. So basically, I mean, we can put a 2-score ewe in a grazing wheat paddock, and she'll come out at weaning time probably 3.5 condition score. She'll actually put weight on during lambing.
Mm.
So how much emphasis, how important to you is genetics, the actual, the genotype of the sheep? I mean, based on what you're saying, then, it doesn't much matter in a lot of ways whether they're, that more efficient model of a sheep, which is a medium sort of a, muscular sheep with the capacity to jump back in lamb, etc., and with early growth pathway and more fatness in there for resilience, etc. That's not so important to you, James, sort of based on what you're saying, which is, I guess I'm a genetics man. I mean, you can feed the animal for the sake of the genetics, so you can have an animal which is capable in various environments. My immediate response would be, if you've got extra feed, it's just as important to have a highly efficient animal so you can
have more
optimise
of
the
them.
feed. Sorry?
Put more of them on the paddock, which is what Charlie would probably say.
Well, exactly. Do more of what Charlie's doing. Because those monsters, really, I think those monsters are a bloody menace to everybody, including, well, mainly the shearers, but, they're not efficient creatures. So that's the only thing I would question in your model. It's a great model, but then, when you come to the fact of how many years are you getting which are like this, then you start to put pressure on you to have the better genotype of sheep, if you can get it,
I suppose there's 2 ways to answer that, I suppose, is that, green feed or fat sheep can hide a lot of managerial, pitfalls or downfalls of many people. And, that's why predominantly 2/3 to 3/4 of southern of New South Wales are autumn lambers probably. So they all lamb in February, March, April because they're scared they can't get their lambs finished to market weight by October or November. And a lot of them still can't do that.
Mm.
So
whereas if you've got a high muscle animal with all those health attributes which come with high muscularity, etc., those sorts of sheep are not only high yield, but they're high health animals, provided that their eating quality is good and everything else. But and those are the traits which I see, which you just don't have in Australian sheep. Most of them are devoid of muscle, and they've got a late maturity pattern, and that's what's bloody wrong with the industry, So they end up being horses when there's a lot of feed, but they're sort of horses anyway because they've got that large body frame and it's a very low efficient type of an animal,
But as we've seen over the past 4 years or 3 years, that with the dry seasons, those people in those management systems and sheep have not scanned well at all and haven't performed well at all. So, dry seasons, really show up the genetics. And even this year, our A group scanned 20% better than our B and C mob because they've been selected over 10 years or 15 years of, never losing a lamb and, good feed, all the, no mastitis and good udders and, all those sorts of things. So, yeah.
Their functional performance is a lot better, yeah. Yep.
And slowly drifting out all those 85 kilo plus ewes. So,
I'm going to slightly divert the conversation just because I'm mindful of time, and there's a couple of things I really wanted to bring into this discussion or reintroduce to the discussion. We did mention a little while ago something around seasonality and the fact James is, obviously brought up the seasonality issue. It's something that I've got in my notes here. I had a conversation with Andrew Hunter a couple of weeks ago when I sent out the invitation for this session, and he said one of the things that he really feels is important to discuss is around aligning the time of joining and lambing with that period of maximum fertility and estrus activity, because these maternal ewes are much more seasonal than first cross ewes. I'm sure like we're all obviously aware of it on this call, but a couple of things here. I suppose we want our ewes in good condition at joining, because if we know they're going to have their, maximum conception rates, we really get that bang for our buck for making sure they're in good condition to conceive a lot of lambs. James, I know you had told me on the phone a few days ago that one of your strategy was to push back your joining. This was in your ewe lambs, I think, but pushing back your joining a couple of weeks to get those better conception rates. And I know it's something that other producers are doing in their adults as well, just acknowledging that, if I give myself a little bit of extra time for the seasonality aspect, but also a little bit of extra time just to get that extra condition on the ewes, you'll just scan, an extra 10, extra 20%, probably quite easily lambs. So I think that's something really important to mention for most farmers who aren't using Regulin to correct the cycling of the ewes. And it really, they're really only hitting their straps probably in mid-February. Would others on the call agree with that? So like, mid-February joining is probably where they're really, finally ramping up their repro. For those joining earlier, you've got a bit of a handicap already on the potential there. Obviously also then matching when they're lambing with that pasture availability, which we've already talked about. So I just wanted to just mention again that seasonality aspect, because I think it is a challenge for quite a few people who, from a first cross background and not realising these composites are a lot more seasonal. Any comments on that one from anyone?
Yeah, there's plenty of people, I suppose, around here still trying to join ewe lambs in mid to late January, and it doesn't work, and they still keep trying to do it again the next year, which I find funny, but
very frustrating.
Historically, I suppose, from an 15th of February joining without Regulin, it's very, very slow. The first cycle is basically 5 or 10% maybe.
Are you talking about ewe lambs or adults, James?
Yeah, ewe lambs. Sorry,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. So ewe lambs are sort of, they hit their straps, from what I've heard, about a month after the adults. Usually, they're a little bit extra seasonal.
Yeah, I mean, they have to have a silent estrus, and then it just seems even besides that, they need a full cycle, even with the rams, to get them going, I suppose. So the trick is, if you're only going to join for 4 or 5 weeks and they miss the first cycle, you've only got a 2-week window, and I suppose people are only getting, a 60 to 70% in lamb rate, which to me, to have a lamb hanging around that long to only get 2/3 of the lamb is a bit of a waste of time, really, to be honest. And the Combs and Sackett still say that not many producers achieve 100% of lambs to ewe lambs joined. That's the magic target, according to them, I think, still. So, whereas we've said use Regulin as a trial the past 3 years and ewe lambs, and it seems to get them firing as soon as the rams walk in the gate. So, for $6, we're sort of prepared to get her to lamb 3 or 4 weeks earlier, and then hopefully then at the end of the year, when the feed dries off, she doesn't need as much grain to get her back up into condition for the following season. We grow our own barley, so we're very self-sufficient in our own grain, even though there's a cost to it.
David, you raised your hand a minute ago. Do you want to comment on the seasonality thing?
Only that nobody's mentioned teasers as a possibility. I was just going to ask James whether he uses teasers, particularly with the maiden ewes, to push things forward a bit, because by and large, you can probably, even with seasonal breeds like your maternals, you can probably bring the the onset of their mating activity or their ovarian activity, you can bring it forward 4 to 6 weeks anyway with teasers, is what people have found in the past. But yeah, do people now use them?
It's pretty commonplace. I think most people would be using teasers. My circles.
I think in composite flocks, teasers are pretty common. I'd say in the border Leicester Merino, or Merino, teasers are probably uncommon, I would have thought. We've been using teasers for 10 years, I suppose, roughly or more. Just the castrated weather lambs with some Ropel.
Yeah.
We didn't have much success by themselves, although when we used Regulin in conjunction with teasers, we seemed to hit the jackpot, I suppose, the past couple of years with the positive Regulin ewe lambs scanning really well and early, and the ones with no Regulin still seem to be in that second cycle still. So
Yeah.
we are going to try a few ram lambs that have been vasectomized. Yep.
Yeah.
And trial that, which is supposedly better, according to all reports. But I'd say they're quite uncommon in the Merino and the Border Leicester Merino flock, to be honest.
I wonder, Dave, and I don't know the answer, that's why I'm wondering, but, we can use teasers to increase the onset of estrus or bring forward the onset of estrus, but I also wonder, are we still, though, handicapped in terms of our ovulation rate? So we're probably not going to get as many multiples joining early as we would if we held it back to their peak.
You're right. It's probably the maximum ovulation rate is probably somewhere in about April. That's if you just follow the ovulation as several people have done over the years, by doing laparoscopic stuff every 3 weeks, right throughout the year. What happens is they go into an anestrus, but that's where they have rams anywhere around, but they go into an anestrus probably in November and December. They're at the depth of anestrus and nothing's happening at all. Their ovaries just go to sleep. And then they start to crank up in as James or Charlie said, I can't remember which, but or both the Edinburgh probably, in February you start to go on. But then the percentage of twin ovulations starts to climb until about mid-April. So that's the sort of annual cycle. So that's a fairly flexible thing, and with good feed and all that sort of stuff, you can overcome it can vary quite a lot, and with good feed and so on, you can actually virtually make a ewe that's mated in the 1st of March or a bunch of ewes with exactly the same combined ovulation rate as in the 1st of April. So it's a rough thing, but generally April is, in terms of the breeding season, if a ewe isn't on heat in April, she should be getting rid of her immediately, because she's absolutely not a ewe at all. And at that time, she's going to have as many ovulations as she's ever going to have during the year. So that's the ideal time. But does it fit into your feed pattern? Does it fit into the economics pattern of getting lambs off? All that sort of thing are other factors you've got to build into the equation. But if you know that, at least you can know how much you're compromising if you mate outside that time.
Yeah.
I just wanted to round this conversation. Sorry, you go, Charlie.
Yeah, look, we've been using vasectomized rams for probably well over 10 years. Our ewe lambs currently are being mated, so we're right in the sweet spot, as David's just described. And they had the teasers with them for 17 days before the rams went in. And we took the teasers out, unlike one of my neighbours who left them in. wasn't a good result. And it is an absolute orgy when the rams go in, I can promise you, that they've got the ewes fired up. And we've got a small mob, as Elise knows, that they're only 6 months of age. They're born in September, but they're 55 kilograms now, and they're hot to trot. The rams are working with them just as much as they are with the July, August ones. So it's going to be interesting to see how that finishes up. But for us, if we can target those ewes that'll lamb almost at 12 to 12 and a half months of age, that's an absolute magic thing for us. And we're probably using April to its best, as David's just described. The one other question I wanted to put to you all is the test. For everyone talks about scanning, but no one ever talks about their scanning results with their second lambers. I reckon the secret to good management is what's your scanning results on your second lambers.
Yeah.
And if you ask people, they'll brag about their older ones, but ask them what their second lambers did, and that's the secret. If you can keep that.
There's awful lot of wastage that happens in 2-year-old ewes. Definitely, because they just don't get looked after and prioritised. And one of the key strategies, or that I believe is one of the key strategies for managing this adult size thing, is to really try and manipulate their adult size through getting them to reproduce and rear a lamb as a lamb. So it's a really key step, I think, and a lot of maternal producers now are, culling their ewe lambs that don't conceive. So they haven't got a ewe lamb that hasn't given birth to a lamb, and they often will go through and potentially cull the ones that don't rear. So really making the most of that ability to, through management, manipulate adult size and sort of handicap those ewes and hold them back. You've really got to look after those ewes because you can't afford to have them dry the next year, and we can see too much of that happening. Some producers are assisting in their recovery by giving them a little bit of extra tucker or a little bit of extra time, or probably both. So staggering the joining of their mature ewes at 2-year-olds, maybe a fortnight later, followed by the ewe lambs maybe a fortnight later, which can prove a little bit difficult for management of, some people, but is certainly a strategy for making sure you're achieving good outcomes in your 2-year-olds. Charlie.
Can I just quickly say, Elise, one producer is now only keeping the progeny of ewe lambs, twin progeny of ewe lambs, isn't he?
No, I think it's only keeping twin born. His ewe lamb replacements are only twin born. And
yeah, I thought it had gone to an extra step.
Yeah, no, it does. So only keeping and joining twin born ewe lambs, and then potentially then only keeping the ones that scan pregnant with twins as a ewe lamb as well. So knowing that he's able to manage those twin born ewe lambs to get good outcomes, and be able to sell off the singles as breeders. Yeah, that's exactly what it is, Dad.
Sorry, I thought the ewe lambs from ewe lambs.
No, because they're born way too late in the season to try and join. Some people can do it, but I think if you've got a high enough reproductive rate in your adults and your 2-year-olds, you don't need to really worry about trying to join progeny of ewe lambs. They're just probably not required in a lot of scenarios. Some people will be trying to do it, but in this example, no. Yeah, it was twin born ewe lambs are joined as the replacements, and then the ones that are retained are the ones that conceive with twins, and the singles bearing ones are sold off. So it's another strategy, I suppose, to further reduce adult size, because being born as a twin, they actually conceive as the same live weight. They'll conceive higher number of fetuses than a single born ewe lamb. And then obviously if they're then pregnant with twins, they're going to be further handicapped because they've got to do a lot more work to rear those twin lambs.
Yep.
And then Charlie's touched on, select, and so is James actually, both doing it potentially, selection opportunities to reduce adult size. So drafting off those those big ewes and either diverting them to a terminal scenario, so you're not going to be breeding replacements out of them, or potentially selling them on to someone else or sale yards or whatever. So there's a few different strategies that seem to be working and seem to be fairly common between you two, James and Charlie, and also Andrew Hunter, who provided me a bit of feedback as well. So I suppose, I'll round off the conversation now with, I suppose, what are our recommendations? So I've got a few notes here. So obviously, making sure you've got an appropriate stocking rate. So it's that balance between making sure your ewes have got enough feed, so you're not compromising their production, you're not compromising their reproduction and lamb survival, but that you're not having too great a proportion of your ewes that are just blowing out in condition, and that feed could otherwise be allocated to having a high stocking rate. So really finding that balance there. I think another one of the key recommendations from the group is making sure your time of lambing is appropriate. So obviously having justifications for why you've got a particular time of lambing, but trying as much as possible to maximise your conception rates. That's very important for the profitability of maternals, as well as managing that ewe's condition throughout the year, matching her requirements to pasture availability, utilising that spring flush as well. And those opportunities for manipulating ewe size through getting good reproduction rates out of your ewe lambs, and potentially peeling off the heavy and also, as Charlie mentioned, the light, I might have been James, the light ones as well. So I suppose, last opportunity, if you wanted to add in any closing comments or any, real take homes that you think are really important, recommendations for those who are going to catch up on this session afterwards. And maybe also if you have any industry contacts or people that you think have some good knowledge to share that people can reach out to if they want more information around this, this concept. Has anyone got any ideas along those lines of, people who are doing really good work in this space?
At least I'd like to just pose a question to the group, I suppose, is that Holmes and Sackett are big advocates of running 7 and 8 year old ewes and having their percentage of ewe lambs compared to the total flock as low as possible. I think the magic figure is 17 to 21% or something, I think it is.
Right.
Has anyone got any thoughts there
Structure.
on their structure, on their percentage?
Well, my only one is that, if you're running merinos, you'd sell them, you'd be getting ready to use it after their 5th year because in fact their wool production goes down to blazes, but in fact their reproductive performance doesn't start to drop off till about 9 years. So in fact, if you're looking at prime lamb mothers and so on, there's no reason why you can't go through to 9 years without any trouble. You're not going to get as much wool off them, but that doesn't matter if they're under those circumstances.
With the amount of surveillance we're starting to do now with our electronic tags and really trying to record the production from these ewes as well, I think we've just got much more of an opportunity to cull ewes based on their production and their performance rather than on age. Obviously, older ewes, you do have a larger breakdown in udders and teeth and things like that, which have got to be monitored. But I really do think, there is a great opportunity that we can be selling. And I know, people in this group do that. They'll sell 2 and 3 year old ewes because they're just not performing, and keep on the property potentially 6 and 7 year old ewes in their place. So I think, that's obviously a strategy is, making sure we're monitoring and using some surveillance to work out who's performing and who's not.
I've got very definite views on that, and I think that once again we get back to those outstanding females, and some of them can go on forever virtually. And if you can stack your paddocks with more of those sorts of sheep, you're going to be miles ahead.
It's just hard in a
I
Mount
know
Ronan
that, but I mean, at least with
scenario
modern,
versus.
I know that, Elise, but when you go to whole flock situations, I mean, basically these days we're getting access to, using ear tags and stuff, electronic tags, trying to get better livestock in bigger numbers and that sort of thing.
James's query about, I suppose, flock structure and what proportion of the flock are ewe lambs. I think we've kind of got a bit of an opportunity at the moment to really value add these maternal ewe lambs, where you obviously have far greater number of ewe lambs that you've bred than you need to retain. Sort of got an opportunity to value add them if you're a good manager and you know how to get these ewe lambs pregnant, that you can join a lot more than what you need and sort of head into that scenario where you can really cherry pick the ones you keep. So they might mostly all get pregnant. You might only need to keep 50% of the pregnant ones. So you can cherry pick and go, well, I'm going to keep all the ones that scanned early because I know having them lambing early on my farm is going to be better than keeping the late scanned ones. Or I might sell the ones that are scanned as singles and only keep the ones that are scanned as twins. So sort of got an opportunity there to value add the ones you're going to sell because they've got a fetus inside and they're selling on Auctions Plus for quite a lot of money. You've also got the opportunity of ramping up your production because the ones you're keeping, whether it be 1,000 ewe lambs or whatever it is, they're the ones that have all conceived early and they might all have twins on board. So just really get some extra opportunities there, which I think a few people are starting to do, realising that they know how to manage these ewe lambs and how to get them pregnant. And also to manage the ones they keep all the way through to get good lamb survival. So actually looking at it as an opportunity that to sell those as mated ewe lambs.
Can I ask a very, last question, Charlie? Your fencing, I mean, that's extraordinary. 10 hectares you're down to. Is it what sort of fencing is it? Traditional or hot wires or?
Yeah, traditional. No, traditional. Yeah, it's traditional fencing.
Yeah, that's remarkable.
It's a 10 to 1.
I'm the same, but I'm about the same, but I've only got a hobby farm.
That's a nice hobby.
I just did some numbers the other day and it's quite fascinating. If you've got paddocks and you work on lamb survival at about 80% when you've got too many versus nearly 90% when you've got it stocked appropriately. It doesn't take long to pay for the fence.
Yeah. You're fairly reliable there, or do you get some really dry seasons sometimes?
No, I think I'd probably say we're a bit favoured.
Yeah.
A bit more reliable than certainly James.
Now, James, I've been to James's place and in a bad year, and it's pretty tough. And with a bit of luck, I'm going to be going to your place if you're around in end of May, Charlie. So we're going to go through there and see James again if he's still around. But we're planning to do a big drive through there. So that'll be a lot of fun if we can.
Make it a bit later. I'm away in Queensland the last 2 weeks of May.
Oh, we'll just leave a postcard and keep driving. Bug you then.
Yeah.
On the way home, Dad. On the way home. So, Charlie, what proportion of your flock are ewe lambs? And do you join them all and keep all the pregnant ones, or are you selling some of the pregnant ones? How does that sort of work?
Well, it was an interesting discussion you've just had because we're currently running 10,000 ewes and we've got 2,800 ewe lambs. I think we can see the flock going up to 12,000 next year, but we keep roughly 3,000, but 3.5. But we see, I agree with you. They're a lacquer band. If the season's tough, you can sell them. They're worth money. At worst, you can cut their heads off if they're pregnant. If things are tough, you can be highly selective. I know James said that he weighs everything and selects. We constantly draft and throw out. And I just think that when you've got, scanning rates of 170, 180, and marking 150, 160, you can be highly selective and gosh, your flock really improves. And I think Nirvana will be when we can get ewe lambs to lamb at 12 months of age, 12 and a half. And, yes, James smiled when I said it, but we are in a favoured environment. Absolutely.
I mean, we're still pretty handy here, Charlie, but everyone says, oh, geez, you're harsh on culling a sheep that has a bad foot or, you know, loses a lamb because we got, you know, 50 km/h winds and 20 mils of rain last night. But if you just, because you are scanning so many and you have so many coming through, you can afford to be, you know, just so strict on culling anything that you don't like or it's too big or one bad foot or, you know, whatever else. So you just can't afford to have excuses because it was wet one night or it was windy or she got through the fence or, you know, just bad luck. There's so many coming through that.
Yeah, the reality is that there are animals in that flock that got through those conditions, and
Yes,
if you got more than what you
100%.
need, then you just take through the ones that do it. Which, you know, which is the opportunity with the ewe lambs to join more than what you think you want to actually keep, because then you can put them under that extra pressure, knowing that they've still got very good resale value. Got this extra time now. We don't have to, you know, the dentition's relaxed a little bit, so we can often at pregnancy scanning still, if we have to send them to the abattoir, they'll still scrape in as a lamb.
Yes, and I
For
mean,
people that shouldn't breed them. And it's
we are very favoured here that there's always an opportunity, every February, March, or April to sow, you know, most of our grazing crops. So, you know, rather than wait for the man upstairs to deliver us, you know, 2 lots of 30 mils to germinate our grasses and clovers and get loose and going, we can create our own autumn break every year, generally without fail. So that's our secret to our 10, 11 ewes a hectare stocking rate, I suppose. So.
And James, you've spent a lot of time in WA too. That's where you got all your good ideas from, didn't you?
What, drinking and staying up till 3 a.m.?
You worked in WA, didn't you?
There was a
Partied,
bit of
apparently.
You're almost a West Australian.
There's no rugby over there.
Did you?
No rugby over there, Dad. No good.
Yeah. I'll never know. We don't follow rugby over here. Anyway, look, I just want to say thanks very much to you, gentlemen, and because it really is. It's been very valuable, and when you have these little Zoom sessions, you just don't know whether anyone's even going. A bit like ram sales, you're not sure whether anyone's even going to arrive, and this was got up as a result of someone asking questions at Elise. Was that a field day, weren't you, Elise?
Look, the producer asked me, you know, how do you keep the weight off these ewes? They're just too bloody fat. And I thought, there's going to be a lot of people.
We'll do this.
Who might value
that person is babysitting his kids. Their mother is flying in from Sydney tonight, so he would very much like to have a copy of the Zoom. So thank you very much indeed, and it's great stuff. And David, maybe we can somehow reactivate a bit of research.
Oh, that's impossible this day and age. But anyway, not that sort of research like we used to do. But I'll reiterate, I enjoyed listening to James and Charlie and their activities. You know, real producers, not fellas like you, Guy.
Well, that's right. I said I was a hobby farmer.
No, I really enjoyed the
yeah, well, thanks very much, and I did too. So good luck over there, everybody, and thanks, Elise.
No worries. Thanks for your time, everyone, and your contribution. I really appreciate it, and for the couple of people who also sent me their feedback so I could sort of incorporate it tonight. I will be sending around a follow-up MailChimp with a link to the recording, and also I'll do a bit of a summary of some of the key take-homes from tonight's session. So thanks very much. That'll be able to be shared with the wider producer network, and you know, we'll be able to track how many people watch it on YouTube.
You will be. I wouldn't know how to do that.
But no, I really appreciate your time and your interaction, James, Charlie, and David. Yeah, it's been a good discussion this evening. If there's any other topics, and if there's any other topics you really, you know, want to have a chat about, just send them through and I can organise another session. Thanks very much.
James just stuck his hand up.
He was saying goodbye.
Goodbye. Oh,
goodbye.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
See you later. Thanks very much indeed.
Bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.